What's up everybody, it's Brian, MachineMasters.com with another Mix Talk Monday video. Today we're going to be addressing a bunch of questions that I've got after I posted a previous video prior to this, maybe 2 weeks or so. The question had to do with mono mixing and more in-depth explanations of what exactly mono mixing is, what it does, how to get to mono mixing, because a lot of different audio interfaces don't have that option. So we're going to jump right into that, and I just want to explain a little more in depth the benefits of mono mixing and how to get to the mono mixing settings in your software or things like that. If you have hardware, you can do that as well. So the first thing that I think is one of the more important aspects of mono mixing is because it introduces frequencies that you usually might not hear when you're listening in a stereo field. When you're listening in mono, everything's going to be coming straight down the middle. You're not going to have a big, nice, open stereo image, or your reverbs aren't going to sound as big and lush and things like that. And mixing in mono, it does suck a little bit because the sound doesn't sound as good as it does in stereo, but in the long run, when you jump back over to stereo, it will make the sound, or your song in general, sound 10 times better in the mix. Everything will be crisp, clear, you won't have any phase issues or anything like that. So back to what I was saying, when you introduce mono mixing, you're going to hear frequencies that sounded muddy in mono, but they didn't in stereo. And when you find those frequencies that are in mono and they're really muddying up the mix, they're not giving enough room for other sounds, you'll be able to throw an EQ on that channel and you'll be able to mix that out while you are in mono, and you'll be able to pinpoint those frequencies that you didn't hear in stereo, even though they are there. And then once you're done with that, you can flip back to stereo and you'll be able to hear. It is a pretty noticeable difference. It's a big difference to be able to hear the difference when you notch that frequency out compared to when you didn't. Definitely always go with your gut with this, as everything in mixing goes, because just because it sounded good in mono, when you notch those muddy frequencies out, those muddy frequencies might have ended up being frequencies that gave a lot of body to the sound in general when you were listening in stereo. So this isn't going to be 100%, but most of the time you will find a clearer mix doing that. Now the next thing that I want to talk about with mono mixing is the introduction of phasing issues. Now phasing, it usually comes into play when you're mixing live instruments compared to software MIDI patterns or VSTs or all virtual instruments and all that. But phasing is when you have one sound source and the sine wave is traveling through the air. That's how sound are created. The sine waves traveling and vibrations in the air. And then you have another sound source, whether it's a double of that signal or something completely different. And it has that same sine wave, but it's flipped, so it's canceling the sine waves out. So you'll actually hear an elimination of the sound. Sometimes completely. You'll think that the fader is all the way down, but it's up, and the phasing, it's just canceling each other out. So you'll be able to find these sounds happening in when you're mixing a mono. Now there are a bunch of different plugins. The easiest thing to do when you run into this situation is a lot of EQs or audio suites and things like that. They have a little button that you could click and it flips the phase. In Pro Tools they have it on the stock EQ. You could go in the audio suite or options and flip phase. I believe it's actually called inverse. Now what that does is it takes that actual sine wave and it flips it, so that way it's no longer going to be canceling each other out. It'll be in line and it'll be set up so that way you won't have any phasing issues. Now there's a bunch of different software out there that allows you to listen to your mix in mono. I know Waves makes a plugin. It's called In Phase, and there's a little button you could click and it switches between mono and stereo. Ozone, I know you could listen in mono when you're under the stereo imaging setting. But there's also a bunch of hardware parts that you could purchase and set up, and it makes it a lot easier and streamlined. The cheapest one, I know Behringer makes one. I'm not sure what it's called, but you could switch between your monitors. I think it's around 100 or 150 bucks. You can switch between your monitors, control your levels. There's a talk back button if you want to talk back to somebody if they're in a different room recording. You have the mono button, and it gives you a bunch of different routing possibilities that might not be on your audio interface, which is really nice. Now, if you have a little bit more of a budget, you could opt for the PreSonus, I believe it's called the monitor control. It comes in a rack unit, and it also has a little thing that you can put on your desk, and you could control everything like that. It has the talkback, it has monitor selection, it has the mono selection. So those things are really cool, and it does give you a little bit of flexibility as far as the routing, and you could quickly flip between your monitors and mono and stereo. So that's it. I hope I nailed this on the head a little more compared to the last video. If you have any questions, of course, or any other topics that you might want me to go into, whether it's physics of sound, mixing tutorials, on-screen mixing, just let me know in the comments. I will be happy to take those in consideration for the next video. So until next Monday, guys, I'll talk to you soon.